I think we're live. Oh, I've got to watch a commercial on my own channel real quick. So, to whoever previews the Twitch streams, working at Twitch, perhaps look into not having to watch your own commercials. The volume going.
And well, he got little.
Okay. Let's see. Gotta change mic settings this time. Does that take effect immediately? Sounds like it does. I don't know, I'm not getting reverb, so we're gonna try 60%, see how that works out tonight. Looks like the channel is recording. Okay, so last time I messed up and I played a whole bunch of music that I could hear, like I think it came over the channel as it was playing, but then when I switched to YouTube, it did not work. So, I usually love Monstercat. They have a Twitch-approved Monstercat station that I found over here at Twitch Music. I've still got this open. And they apparently have a few. I don't use Spotify a lot, so I just did one of their playlists. They've got Monstercat. And we're going to rock out to him. I kind of went through it, looking through the list they got here. And I'm not familiar with any of these. Oh, there's Tristan. But I don't know how there's so many I haven't heard. Probably because I get a lot of my music through Pandora, and it's probably like just all the main stuff, the mainstream or whatever. Who knows? But here we go, branching out, and it'll all show up on YouTube, I hope. Okay. Oh no, I already broke it. What's going on? I played it too loud and pissed off the Spotify gods. So while that's going on, so I've got a video I'm watching over on my other screen that is a rundown of what I'm going to be doing now. I don't know the copyright limitations on this. So what I'll be doing is I've got the volume on it, and I'm just going to be listening to it, watching it on the other screen. While programming on the main screen, I'm going to do kind of just a quick recap from starting about 5 minutes in, because honestly 7 o'clock snuck up on me, and I don't have my glass of water, I don't have my vape set up. I know, so picky. At least I have my computer glasses tonight, so originally was going to stream last night, didn't have my computer glasses. I know I'm not wearing them yet, I'm still setting stuff up, but old age, man, let's sneak up on you too. Okay, so I got the video starting to play on the left screen. I'm waiting on it to fire up. Also, my music is paused. I did not pause it. So I don't even know if my stream's actually working right now, if everything else is frozen. Oh, there we go. Google's dying. I don't see Twitch on this list, so Twitch should still be rocking and rolling. I might go buy a brand new computer this weekend. It's very tempting, and everything freezing up tonight, it's just all the more tempting. Let's refresh this Monstercat page. Refresh this YouTube video. See what we get. I gotta get my kill my lung juice going on here. I always feel so guilty vaping in my crowds and video. And I'm like, wait, hold on. We are the sons and daughters of a generation where everyone smokes cigarettes. Hold on. I'm doing fine. Okay, here we go. YouTube video is still loading. Promised myself I was going to hop on like 30 minutes earlier, set everything else up, but Now you know what to expect from my channel. Yeah, it's probably going to get better once I get the new computer and I can just fire things up. I work on a work laptop all day, so mine just sits here quietly collecting cobwebs. There we go.
In this beginner assignment, we're going to make a very simple but playable 2D game to use
Every time
many
you
of the
refresh
basic
the video,
concepts from the beginner
it cranks the
tutorial
volume up.
modules. We'll be making a 2D UFO game where we'll be collecting gold nuggets.
Okay, I'll see if they'll let me skip this
We'll
time.
see how to import our art assets from the Unity Asset Store. To access the Asset Store, choose Window, Asset Store, or use the keyboard shortcut Command 9 on Mac or Control 9 on Windows. The Asset Store is a service that Unity Technologies provides where creators can both buy and sell assets to make games.
Yep.
These include art, music, teaching projects so that we can expand the window.
Okay. Expand the window, that's a great idea. Okay. So he's trying to load up his window.
In the upper right corner of the expanded Asset Store window, we'll see a listing of asset categories. At the bottom, we should find Unity Essentials. Expand this category and we'll find a subcategory called Sample Projects. Within Sample Projects, we'll find an item called 2D UFO Tutorial. Click on the item title to open it. Once the page loads, we'll see a download button in the upper left corner. Click on the download button to begin downloading the assets. The download button will be replaced by the percentage of the download completed once we click on it.
I see what's going on.
Once the download is complete, we'll see a dialog.
I've been switching videos through the Lightbox motor. Psst. Hold on. Got a big direction pass. She's like, I am not leaving. This is my space. You will not remove me. Heathen. My cat, that is. Okay, here we go. This is a 16-minute video. I was
to want to put in fixed update.
Sorry that I can't put any of this on the main screen. I don't
but how do we
know if it's gonna cut off parts of the video like it did with music last time.
In MonoDevelop that searches the Unity API. On the Mac, it's Command plus single quote, and on Windows, it's Control plus single quote. Select the item we want to research, in our case input, and hold down the Command or Control key, and then press the single quote key. This search brings up every reference in our documentation.
Also take your subway, or I'll start putting it in your clean
Let's select Input at the top. Interface into the input system.
Love you.
This brings up the page on Input. This is the page on the Input class. We use this class to read the access setup in the Input Manager and to access multi-touch and accelerometer data on mobile devices.
He's just blasting.
We read the text on the top of the page to understand how to use the class.
So
in our case, to get input from the player on all
this is where he was showing how his IDE that he has, I'm guessing it's Mono, is what I used to have through Unity before, but now I've got
the class variables hold information like the number of touches in touch count or a reference to the default gyroscope with gyro. The class functions do something.
And none of what he's doing actually pops up. Now I know how to get to the Unity documentation, and the URL is on the video that I'm going off of tonight. So
click on the link to bring up
drop
a
that
page
link.
on the
So if you
function
need any
or
of
variable.
these,
Let's look at input.getAccess. This page includes the signature of the function, a description of the function, and code snippets showing us how to use it in Unity's JavaScript and C#. We will be using C#. For more information on Input and the Input Manager, please see the information link below. We'll be using input.getAccess in a very similar way to the code snippet shown. Let's return to our script and write our code.
Okay.
Type
Here we
float
go.
move
My
horizontal
string,
equals
and boom.
input.getAccess horizontal float
These are fix update
vertical
versus update.
equals input.getAccess vertical.
Oop.
Now we can delete the input
And a
line.
little strong.
This grabs the input from our player through the keyboard. The float variables move horizontal and move vertical record the input from the horizontal and vertical axes, which are controlled by the keys on the keyboard. These keys are set by default in the Input Manager. Our player game object uses a rigid body 2D
I'm
and
still learning
interacts with the 2D
a lot
physics
of
engine.
this.
We'll use this input to add forces to the rigid body.
So let's check out update versus fix update. So the story is, the whole reason I started building video games was because I just had design ideas. It's like, oh, I want to tell this story, I want to tell that story. And then all these people that were way better at everything than me said, hey, I'll help out. And so I never really reached my full potential with anything. And then I learned that relying on others did not always pan out. Things took too long, people had no time, and I needed to get off my ass and learn something.
Update is probably the most commonly used function in Unity. It's called once per frame on every script that uses it. Almost anything that needs to be changed or adjusted regularly happens here. The movement of non-physics objects, simple timers, and the detection of input are just a few things that are usually done in Update. Note that Update is not called on a regular timeline. If one frame takes longer to process than the next, the time between update calls will be different. Fixed Update is a similar function to Update, but it has a few important differences. Fixed Update is called on a regular timeline and will have the same time between calls. Immediately after Fixed Update is called, any necessary physics calculations are made. As such, anything that affects a rigid body, i.e. a physics object, should be executed in Fixed Update rather than Update. When scripting physics in the Fixed Update,
Okay. That makes sense. We'll stop playing that in case I'm breaking any rules there.
2D and move the player game object in the scene. To know more about how to apply forces to the rigid body 2D, let's check the documentation. First, type rigid term available to the rigid body 2D class. Go to the page.
If you want to check the
What is a
documentation,
vector
be
2
my
on
guest.
both the X
So I do program during the day,
Player
but my
game
style
object.
is more
From this script,
find what I need,
variable to
use
hold
it, and
this
learn everything
reference
I
in
need
our
to know surrounding
reference.
the
We're
specific
going to
process I'm
declare a
doing.
new start function, and in it, we're going to write RB2D equals get component
And
rigid
the
body
mouse cursor
2D.
points the wrong way. Is that
In
miss
Fixed
anybody
Update,
else?
let's use rigid body 2D dot add force
No, it's
with a
frozen.
vector 2, and we'll leave the force mode at default by omitting it from our code. So in our script, we need to type RB2D dot add force and then some vector 2 value. Now,
This machine is
how
a
do we
slug.
get our two float values into a vector 2 value? Let's create a new vector 2 variable called movement. This will be equal to a new vector 2 that's made up of an x and a y. The x and y values will determine the direction of the force we will add to our UFO. What is our x
I'm going
value?
to go back a bit
Add
since everything's
force with a
freezing. I haven't really paid
rigid
attention to what
body
you're saying.
2D using the rigid body 2D component. We want to access that component from this script. There are several ways that we can do this, but in our case, we'll cover only one of the main ways of accessing another component on the same game object. We'll create a variable to hold this reference in our script, and we'll set this reference in the start function. Let's return to our script. In our script, we need to write private rigid body 2D, RB2D, to create the variable to hold the reference.
I missed
D
the private
to create
variable.
the variable to hold
That's
the
living inside of
reference.
the player controller
We're going to
class.
declare a new start function, and in it, we're going to write RB2D equals getComponent rigid body 2D. In fixed
Rigid
update,
boy.
let's use rigidbody2d.addForce with a vector 2, and we'll leave the force mode at default by omitting it from our code. So in our script, we need to type rb2d.addForce and then sum vector. We'll leave the force mode at default by omitting it from our code. So in our script, we need to type rb2d.addForce and then sum vector 2 value.
Okay.
Now, how do we get our two float values into a vector 2 value? Let's create a new vector 2 variable called movement. This will be equal to a new vector 2
Guy
that's
keeps
made
writing
up
half
of an
pieces of
x
code,
and a y.
letting them be broken,
The
and
x
then
and
going
y
back.
values will determine the direction
Adding
of
be
the
like, oh,
force
I need
we
to
will
add this so
add
it'll
to
all
our
work.
UFO. What is
How do you
our
code
x
like
value?
that?
That would be move horizontal. With this, our left and right keys will add
No, there's
force,
unnecessary
moving the
spaces.
UFO to the left or right. What is our y? That would
Does
be
it move vertical?
vertical.
Now
we use movement, our new vector 2 value, in rb2d.addForce
adding
as
spaces in between my commas.
rb2d.addForce movement.
Okay, I get that people like space when they read, but I mean, really, code is about efficiency. I know. I'm such a hypocrite because I'm gonna have to put them between my equal signs, but I don't need space between commas.
Let's save this script and return to Unity. We can check for errors in our footer or the console, and there are none. Good. Now, let's test what we've written.
Get rid of this update
Hit play.
set.
The first thing we'll notice is that the player immediately flies downward off the playing field. This is because the default for our rigid body 2D is to apply gravity downwards along the y-axis. Since our game is designed as a top-down view, this doesn't make any sense. Exit play mode. To eliminate this behavior, we'll set the gravity scale property of our rigid body 2D attached to our player to 0. This means that no gravity will be applied. This is one reason why making a top-down 2D game is a little easier.
Hold on, it shows these services every time. Can I get rid of this? I don't think I'm gonna make any money off of this game that Unity already built 5 years ago, or however old this video is. Hold on, importing scripts. That must be the script I just built. So I don't think anybody's even watching. Let's see. I'm running on 2 screens. I'm eventually going to be setting up a third one so that I can keep track of everything at once, but I don't think anybody's actually here. Bacon Waffles auto hosting. I got me set up there. Here, even not even open at this point. There we go. What is it trying to load? Okay. There we go. In 1 second, I'm going to switch my windows so I can switch back and forth between chat anyone throws out questions. Not that I have any idea what I'm doing, but you never know. It could happen. Okay.
Because we don't have to
Here we
deal
go.
with gravity in our physics.
So he's
Now, play
got
again and test. By
player
using the
selected,
key set up in
which
the input manager, the
now
UFO
he's-
moves in the scene.
is
Gravity's
now
now
gravity.
off. The player is still very slow. This is probably too slow to be playable, but the basic
let's try it out.
concept works
First run.
100%. To stop testing, exit play mode. Let's return to our code and create a tool that will give us control
slide
over
all
the
Mario
speed
style.
of the UFO.
Lost screen. Into the
We need
void.
to multiply our movement by some value. We could simply enter that value here on our script, but if we ever needed to make any tweaks or changes, we would have to return to our scripting editor,
Yeah,
change the
variables.
value in the script, and then recompile.
Oh, I
This
turned
would
off
take
the
time.
jams.
The solution is to create a public variable in our script. Let's create a public float called speed. By creating a public variable in our script, this
Thought I had
variable will
music.
show up in the inspector
there.
as an editable
Here
property.
we go.
When we use a public
Start with the
variable,
Lions
we
by
can make all of our
Televisor.
changes in the editor. Let's now multiply movement by speed. We can use this to control our movement value from inside the editor.
I'll bounce this out
Save
a
these
bit.
changes and return to Unity. Creating a public variable in our script, this variable will show up in the inspector as an editable property. When we use a public variable, we can make all of our changes in the editor.
Nice.
Let's now multiply movement by speed. We can use this to control our movement value from inside the editor. Let's
looks a little
save these
familiar
changes
from the
and return to
XNA days.
Unity. When we return to the editor, we can see our player controller script now has a speed property. Let's set this property to
Does
1000.
Hold on. Oh, it's still loading. Oh, it's frozen. There we go, there's our speed. I did this. You don't even have to set it in the script. Wait. Yeah, you just declare it. That's beautiful.
Play the scene and test.
Oh, speed 1000. It seems like a bad idea. He's doing speed 1000 on here.
It works, but the player is moving
We're going
way
to
too
this
fast.
with 100.
But changes are fast too. Let's exit play mode
try
and
this
let's
out.
change the value to 10.
Whoa. Oh, no. We lost him. One trick I remember is... Can you tell me... Where he's at? Oh, there we go.
That's better. Congratulations. We can now move our player character. You'll notice, however, that the player can just fly through the walls, which is not what we want. In the next
There we go.
lesson, we'll add collision detection.
No, too fast. Can't find him. Okay, switching to video 4 of 9. I'll drop a link in here, so if
In
anyone
this
is
video,
still following
we'll
along.
set up the collisions for our scene. Let's start by zooming out our scene view. I'm going to do this by scrolling
On
the
the
mouse
same video.
wheel to bring the entire background view.
There we go. There's a link. Oh, I just noticed my stream isn't showing the entire video. Give me a second, I'm gonna fix that. Let me edit my entire first video that way. Yeah, I'm gonna have to shrink it down. There we go. Is that going to take effect immediately? Ah. Okay, I'll do 5 seconds of light. Would you like to see your Unity services? Okay, here we go. We got the actual video for 4 up. Let's jump into this.
In this video, we'll set up the collisions for our scene. Let's start by zooming out our scene view. I'm going to do this by scrolling the mouse wheel to bring the entire background into view. Right now, our background image shows a visual representation of walls, but as we'll have noticed, these walls do not actually prevent the player from moving through them. They're simply artwork on a 2D sprite. They don't affect the mechanics of the game beyond giving us something to look at. In order for the player game object or any other physics object to be obstructed by the wall, we'll need to add collider components to the game object to represent these walls. A collider is a shape or volume which is used by the physics engine to identify collisions. The physics engine detects collisions between 2 or more colliders in the scene. For the physics engine to identify the collision, at least one of the colliding game objects must have a rigid body 2D component. As we discussed before, in this project we're using 2D physics, and so we'll be using the Collider 2D component. The Collider 2D component defines a 2D shape or line which the 2D physics engine will use to calculate collisions. In this project, we'll place 2D colliders around the edge of the playfield to keep our player game object from leaving the game. We'll also add a collider to the player so that the 2D physics engine can detect collisions with the environment. Let's highlight the player game object. The player game object already has a rigid body 2D component attached, so we don't need to add another. This will allow the player game object to participate in collisions, as it will meet the requirement of having at least one game object with a rigid body 2D attached in order to detect collisions. First, let's add a 2D collider to our player. The player is circular in shape, so we'll use a Circle Collider 2D component.
Okay.
With the player still highlighted, click the Add Component button. If we type Circle, the Circle Collider 2D will appear. Select that to add it to the player. With the collider added, let's focus in on the player. Place your mouse over the scene area, and with the player selected, press the F key.
Okay.
When we add a collider, it's automatically scaled to match the size of the sprite. In this case, this leaves us with some empty space around our UFO. We can modify this by changing the collider's radius. Let's set the radius so that it more or less matches the shape of the sprite. By clicking and dragging on the title of the radius field, we can see that a value of 2.15 works pretty nicely. Now, let's add colliders to our walls. Let's highlight the background, mouse over the scene, and push F to frame selected, and we'll use the mouse wheel to zoom it in a little bit. With the background object selected, let's choose Add Component, Physics 2D,
Just want to type in square.
Box Collider 2D. In the scene view, we'll notice that a green box has appeared around the borders of our background sprite. Let's play the scene to test. As we can see, the player flies up to the top of the screen. The reason this is happening is because when we start our game, the physics engine determines that we have two objects occupying the same 2D space. The player's inside the box collider for the background. The physics engine's solution is to push the two objects apart by adding forces to any attached rigid body 2Ds.
Got
Because the
it.
player is the only game object with a rigid body 2D
taking this
attached,
on
it's the
whatever
only
this
game
is now.
object that will have forces applied to it, and it goes flying out of the way. The issue here is that our physics system currently thinks our background object is a single solid object, and that the player, also a single solid object, shouldn't be in the middle of it.
Don't
To
belong
fix
to your
this,
spaceship.
we're going to replace our single large collider with a set of smaller colliders to represent the walls. To make the colliders easier to see, we can temporarily switch the scene view from shaded mode to wireframe mode using the draw mode menu in the upper
Whoa.
left of the scene
Are you
view
sure?
window. Now we can see just the underlying shapes of the objects in our scene without the
Interesting.
distraction of the texture of our sprites. A game object can have multiple colliders attached to it, and we're going to take advantage of this for our game. Currently, we have one Collider 2D component. Let's move it into a better position before we add another one. Each collider has its own properties. We're going to use the offset and size properties of our Box Collider 2D to scale and position our collider to have it act as a wall. First, let's set our collider shape using the size property. By default, Unity attempts to fit the size of the collider to the size of the sprite it's attached to. This means that
why you
one
would wanna
dimension
do
of our
this.
square
Yeah.
is already correct. Let's keep the value for the y-axis and adjust the value for x. We'll start by setting the x size to 3.3.
I'm sure you'd want to do it in white.
Let's switch the scene view back to shaded mode. Now we have a shape that's reasonably wall-like but in the wrong position. We'll use the offset x property to move our first collider over to the right side. This can be
Yes,
done
Mr. Paul,
either
focus
by
on this
clicking
one.
and dragging
Whoa.
on the title of the x-axis field
This
or
is
by
the wall
entering the
network.
value numerically. Let's set the x offset to 14.3. We now have
suppose
one wall, but we need 3 more. Let's duplicate our first collider to create the opposing wall. Using the component context menu in the upper right of the component, choose Copy Component. Afterwards, click the same menu again and choose Paste Component as New. This will paste a new copy of the component with the same settings. Now, we're going to reverse the position of the Box Collider 2D along the x-axis by setting the x offset to negative 14.3. Next, we'll use the same process to
Oh, I
create our
see.
upper and lower walls.
I just did it backwards.
Choose Paste Component as New again to create a third copy of our Box Collider 2D. Now, we're going to move it into position by swapping the x and y values. Set the y size to 3.3 and x to 31.64. Now, set the x offset to 0 and the y
Oh, I did not
offset
like that.
to 14.3. Now, using the component context
that's
menu, let's copy the
Right.
component values of the third collider and paste component as new to create the fourth wall.
Just coming together.
We'll set the y offset to be negative 14.3, and we're done. Let's enter play mode to
Oh,
test.
so you don't have to click the settings, you just like right click here.
Now, the player will
So these
collide
are
with
rock
all
all
four
on my
walls
screen.
and stay within the playfield. It's worth noting that although the 4 box colliders we added overlap each other,
There we go.
they won't create a collision or go flying because they don't have a rigid body 2D component attached
okay.
and therefore won't receive forces from one another. It's fairly common for colliders to overlap each other in this
that's
manner
physics.
when laying out levels using static,
a little
non-moving
fast.
objects.
So,
In our
we're
next
gonna
video,
switch that.
we'll get our camera moving and following the player.
It has a speed somewhere. Here we go. Change that to 10. Okay, let's see who's hanging out in chat. Okay. Switching video. Hold on. No, I don't want to. I don't want to project to the TV. Okay. So we're gonna follow the player with the camera. That seems like important stuff. So my whole long-term plan, I'll turn this up, is kind of run through this tutorial and then start working on my own game and try to apply the same things. Okay.
In this lesson, we're going to get the camera moving and following the player. Currently, the camera is stationary. We need to tie the camera to the player game object. We can do this by making our camera a child of the player game object. Drag the camera in the hierarchy onto the player. In simple terms, we can think of the parent-child relationship as attaching the child to the parent in a one-way connection. If the parent moves, the child will move and maintain its relationship to the parent. If the child moves, however, the parent will not be moved. This is a fairly typical setup with the camera as a child of the player. If we move the player in the editor, we can see that the camera's field of view, represented by the gray box, moves with it.
Wait, but
if we change the player's rotation, the camera rotates as well. Let's test this in play mode. We enter play mode and use the arrow keys to move. But when we hit the wall, the UFO begins to spin and things go a little crazy. What's happening here? Well, with the camera as a child of the player, even though the camera is not moving at all relative to the player's game object, the player's game object is rotating, so the camera's point of view rotates with it. This may make us, or our audience, queasy. This is clearly not an ideal setup for this particular game. In a typical setup, the camera as a child of the player game object will always be in a position relative to its immediate parent, and this position will be the parent's position in the game, modified or offset by any values in the child's transform. In our case, we can't have the camera as a child of the player, so let's detach it by dragging it above the player in the hierarchy.
There you go.
Our offset value will be the difference between the player game object and the camera. Now, we need to associate the camera with the player game object, not...
I'm going to pause here for a second and see if I can match my camera settings to his. It looks as if they were already there. He must be on a larger screen than I am. The graphic, everything. Skybox, background. Background's clean. What do they look at? I like orange. I might be the only one. Rusty orange. Not very space-like, I know, but...
as a child, but with a script. With the main camera still highlighted, let's use the Add Component button to add a new script. And let's name the script Camera Controller. If we type the name of a component in the search box and it's not found, it will prompt us with the New Script button. This is a shortcut which allows us to quickly create scripts by typing their name and clicking New Script.
Do this.
Click Create an Ad,
Services.
or simply hit the
Like,
Return
gosh,
or
we need some
Enter key to
services.
confirm our selection. As we saw earlier, this way of creating a script will create that script asset
how my
on the
script
root
went
or
here.
top level of our project view.
Oh, his did too. Okay.
Let's put Camera Controller in the Scripts folder and then open it for editing.
Keep your files organized, kids.
We need two variables here, a public GameObject reference to the player and a private vector3
Your
to
business
hold
is
our
growing,
offset
which means
value.
now you need
Oh,
to
hey,
hire
thanks,
more
Sal.
people.
Public
Oh, the searching.
GameObject
emails.
Where do we
player.
start?
ZipRecruiter. Whether you're looking to fill one position or 20,
That might
ZipRecruiter
explain
makes
Then
hiring
type
simple. One
private
click and your job is posted to over
vector3.
200 job
Hey.
sites. Use ZipRecruiter's
Type
dashboard to easily screen
Spotify
and
has
evaluate
commercials?
candidates and find the
What?
right hire fast. ZipRecruiter, the fastest way to hire. Now try ZipRecruiter free. Just click the banner now or go to
I see what you
ZipRecruiter.com/Spotify.
mean.
That's
Okay.
ZipRecruiter.com/Spotify.
My beautiful orange is gone.
That's the sound you'll hear right before you try the newest seasonal from Sam Adams, Fresh as Hellas. And
Interesting.
that's the
Let's
sound of
just
your
go
taste buds
spray
colliding with this
afterwards.
Hellas lager,
and a
brewed
Wait,
with
hold on.
orange blossom
1 second.
for a
What
slightly
is?
citrus
How many
flavor,
commercials do I get on
floral
Spotify?
notes, and a touch of malt
What's
sweetness.
going on here?
Get Fresh as Hellas in
Ah,
stores now.
Not gonna let me see
Take
it.
hold of the seasonal.
Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass. Safe responsibly.
Hold on,
Five
is it a
times
third
more
commercial?
hires are made through
It
Indeed.com
is.
than any other job site, according
What?
to independent research. Imagine a lottery
Okay.
that had 5 times more winners,
Whatever.
or a Sunday
private
with 5 times more
vector3
touchdowns.
to hold our
When you're
offset
hiring,
value.
it makes
Commercials
5
are
times
Type
more
Very
sense
public
to
distracting.
use it.
Let's just leave that for now.
GameObject player.
Okay.
Player
Backing up a little bit.
in the Scripts folder and then open it for editing.
Let's see. So it looks like my script is still where I put it.
We need two variables here, a public GameObject
Okay.
reference to the player and a private
Modify
vector3
from
to
outside.
hold our
Sure,
offset
let's
value.
reload. Oh, right,
Type
'cause I changed
public
the speed. The
GameObject
speed doesn't have
player.
anything in here, so maybe it like creates that line of code automatically.
Then type private vector3 offset. Offset is private because we can set that
Oh,
value
that's
here
what it means.
in the script.
Just want to code it how I
For
code. Okay. Sorry, backing up the video again.
Type
Where's he at?
public
He's in a different
and a private
script.
vector3 to hold our offset value.
On the
Type
controller.
public GameObject player.
Okay.
Then type private vector3 offset. Offset is private because we can set that value here in the
this video,
script.
he's making
For our
a lot of
offset value,
indentations
we will
between
take the
things. I'm just
current
wondering, what's
transform
coming?
position of the camera and subtract the transform position of the player to find the difference between the two. This will be the offset value. So in Start, we can make offset equal to our transform position minus the player's transform position. Type offset equals transform.position minus player.transform.position. When written like this, transform references the transform of the game object that this script is attached to. It's worth noting that as this script is attached to the same game object as the camera component, transform.position references the transform's position for the camera as they are both attached to the same game object. In update, we'll set the transform position of our camera to our player's transform position plus the offset. This will happen every frame because it's in update.
Okay, good. My first question was going to
Type
be, so it's going to be stop.
Transform.position equals player.transform.position plus offset. This means as we move our player with the controls on the keyboard, that each frame before displaying what the camera can see, the camera is moved into a new position aligned with the player object just as if it were a child of that object, except that
I
it will
think so.
not be
Let
spinning
me
around the
fix
game
that.
board as the
Let
parent
me pause real quick. Yeah, my C# is definitely a little rusty. Oh wait, no, the camera looks like it's still there. Looks like it's still there. Here, let's try it out, since we just added stuff anyways. Yeah, I usually do PHP and JavaScript every day. Okay, yeah. That's still spinning around. Let's see.
object spins. However, update is not the best place for this code. It
Well,
is
why didn't you tell me to
true
put it
that
there?
update runs every frame, and
The guy
in
on the
update
YouTube,
each
not you.
frame, we can track
Listening
the
at home.
position of the player's game object and set the position of the camera.
You just
However,
tell me, even
for
though I told
follow
you to put this code
cameras,
here,
procedural
you don't want to do
animation,
that.
and gathering last known states, it's best to use late update. Let's change update to late update. Late update runs every frame just like update, but it is guaranteed to run after all items have been processed in update. So when we set the position of the camera, we know absolutely that the player has already moved for that frame. So let's
okay.
test this. Let's save our script and return to Unity.
I'm just gonna watch him play this, because I just tried this out. Still getting the
First,
spins.
we need to create a reference to the
spaceship is
player
drunk.
game object by dragging the player game object onto the player slot in the camera controller's component. Enter play mode,
Wait.
and now we get the behavior we want, controller's component.
Oh.
To the player game object, turn to Unity.
I think I see the stuff I missed while ago now.
First, we need to create a reference to the player game object by dragging the player game object onto the player slot in the camera controller's component. Enter play mode, and now we get the behavior we want.
Oh.
The camera follows the UFO without rotating when we collide. In the next assignment, we'll finish the basic
Why
play
did we do
area
that?
by creating and placing our special pickup objects
Why?
onto the player frame. So let's test this. Let's save our script and return to Unity. First, we need to create a reference to the player game object by dragging the player game object onto the player slot in the camera controller's component. Enter object onto the player object. First, we need to create a reference to the player game object by dragging the player game object onto the player slot in the camera controller's component. Enter play mode, and now we get the behavior we want. The camera follows the UFO without rotating when we collide. In the next assignment, we'll finish the basic play area by creating and placing our special pickup objects.
Go back one more time.
When
see
we
what his
collide,
settings
already
are.
move our script to create a reference to the player game object.
Seems at -10. Oh, let me switch back to chat while I'm doing this. Okay. Let's try -15. Does that change anything? I don't know if I have to worry about that just yet. Yeah, if you see why the camera's too zoomed in, feel free to let me know. Let's see. There's a clip that shows what his camera settings were. thought I checked them all again. Here we go, main camera. The scale's a little off, but not that much. Graphic settings, step. Okay, yeah, it looks just like this. Yeah, he must just be on a larger screen. And we got this scale right here. Maybe I messed with that in the beginning. That could be it. If that's the case, is that just a Unity item, or is that something in here? Is it just like a game perspective? So you have filing options with main. Everything else has different settings. This must be a Unity like preview item, I guess. Okay. Copying the next link, and here we go, creating collectibles.
So far, we have created a playfield and a player game object, and we have the player moving under our control. In this lesson, we'll create the collectible objects for our player to pick up. First, open the Sprites folder. Drag the sprite Pickup into the hierarchy. You'll notice after dragging in the Pickup sprite that we still can't see it. That's because it's being rendered behind both the player and background sprites. To bring it forward, we need to set the sorting layer in the sprite renderer component. Set the sorting layer to pickups. Now, the player game object is still in the way. This is because the player sorting layer is in front of the pickups sorting layer. Let's temporarily deactivate the player game object. Select the player game object and deselect the checkbox in front of the name field. This is the game object's active checkbox. Deselecting it will deactivate the game object in the scene. This will give us a clear working space for our new pickup object, which we can now see. Focus the scene view camera on the pickup object by highlighting it and pressing the F key while the cursor is over the scene view. So that we can collide with the pickup, let's add a Circle Collider 2D component to it. With the pickup highlighted, click Add Component, Physics 2D, then Circle Collider 2D. Adjust the radius property of the Circle Collider 2D so that it fits the sprite artwork visually by dragging in the radius field. To be effective, the collectible must attract the attention of the player. So let's make the object more attractive. There's one thing I feel certainly attracts the attention of a player, and that is movement. So let's rotate our pickup. One way to do this is with a script. With the pickup object still selected, use the Add Component button in the inspector. Let's create a new script called Rotator. Click Create and Add to confirm, and let's organize the script by placing it in the Scripts folder.
That's the ones that they've already done.
Open the Scripts folder and double-click to open it for editing.
So I do JavaScript all day long, but I've been told
we want the sprite to spin, and we want to do it with this script. Let's remove the sample code we don't need.
Oh no, it does.
We will not be using forces, so we can use update rather than fixed update. We want to rotate the object every frame. To make the pickup spin, we don't want to set the transform rotation, but we want to rotate the transform. Type transform inside update. Select it and hold down the Control key on Windows or the Command key on Mac and type single quote. Again, this brings up the page with the search term transform. Select transform.
Oh no, let's see if I can get this working. He got it
Scroll
working
down.
in his while ago.
Search term transform. Hold down the Control key on Windows or the Command key on Mac and type single quote.
Yeah, I must just be
Again,
using a
this
different
brings up the
program than him.
page with the search term transform. Select
Now.
transform.
Oh well, I know how to get back
Scroll
into the
down
stuff we need.
until you see Transform's public functions. There are two main ways to affect the transform. These are translate and rotate. Translate moves the game object using its transform. Rotate rotates the game object using its transform. We will use rotate. So let's click on the link. This brings up the page for
I didn't realize
transform.rotate.
how powerful this was.
Note, again, the two signatures. One is using a vector 3, and the other is using 3 float values for x, y, and z, or z. Both have the optional parameter space, which we will leave at default for this lesson. Again, we'll choose the most simple form that only uses the vector 3 for direction. Let's return to our code. After transform, making sure that transform is written to begin with a lowercase t, write rotate new vector 3 0, 0, 45. This means we'll rotate around the z or z axis. Now, this action also needs to be smooth and frame rate independent, so we need to multiply the vector 3 value by time.delta time. It is worth noting that even though we are working with a 2D sprite, we are using a vector 3 to rotate the collectibles transform. This is because the transform of the 2D sprite still exists in the 3D volume. When using the transform component with 2D objects, we simply ignore the axes we don't need. Now that we are done with our rotator script, save this script and return to Unity. Let's test by entering play mode. And we can see our pickup object rotates.
My man, always testing.
Let's exit play mode. Okay, we have the start of a working pickup object. Next, we want to place these pickups by entering play mode. And we can see our pickup object rotates. Now that we are done with our rotate.
Okay, let's see what I missed. And I apologize if anybody's telling me already. I don't have them all on 2 windows, so I've got just the video and my code. Transform.rotate new vector 3 0, 0, 45 times delta time. System collections.
Rotator script, save this script and return to Unity.
Perhaps it didn't
Let's
say.
test by entering play mode.
Perhaps.
And we can see our pickup object rotates. Let's exit play mode.
I'm gonna pause, switch to chat. Yeah, that makes sense. Learning curve being more of a UI thing. I'm just glad that there is a UI. When I did XNA way back when, it was just, as far as I can remember, it was just code, code, and more code. It had several more steps to everything. Yeah, you think it's mono as well? Yeah, I had Visual Studio for something else, and I haven't done that in a while, but apparently this is still my go-to for the scripts that we're using. Let's see, what are we missing? So we've got the rotator script, and let's go back to the video. Is it going to preview of the script? I think I can do that as well. Ah, and here we go. It's just not saved. Weird. I thought I had saved it. Okay. There we go. That looks pretty now. Doesn't look. Oh, I see. Because I did my own style. Unity's like, I don't know what you're going for. I'm gonna test that out here in a second. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I had the code to do the proper .NET way or whatnot. My boss at work actually does his brackets the same way. And we jokingly fight about it every day. Nope, still doesn't like it. Oh, it's loading. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. But it's working.
Passed by
All that
entering play
matters.
mode. And we can see our pickup object rotates.
Okay, excellent.
Step. We need to make our pickup object into a prefab. Remember, a prefab is an asset that contains a template or blueprint of a game object or game object family.
So it's like a
We
class.
create a prefab from an existing game object or game object family, and once we create it, we can use it in any scene in our current project.
Well, that's cool.
With a prefab of our pickup object, we will be able to make changes to a single instance in our scene or to the prefab asset itself, and all of the pickup objects in our game will be updated with those changes. You'll notice we already have a folder to hold our prefabs.
More like
Let's
a function.
drag the pickup
Like
game
a class.
object
I
from
use
our
classes a lot.
hierarchy and place it into our prefabs folder. When we drag an item from our hierarchy into our project view, we create a new prefab asset in our project. Before we spread our collectibles around the game area, we should create a new game object to hold our pickups and to help organize our hierarchy. Let's create a new game object
Exception. That'll probably get solved.
and call it Pickups. Check the transform to make sure our Pickups holder object is at origin object and call it Pickups. Check the transform to make sure our Pickups holder object is at origin or 000, and if not, use the component context menu to reset it. Next, drag our pickup game object onto it. Now, we want to spread a number of these pickup objects around the play area. Make sure the pickup game object is selected, not the parent. Now, let's back out a little so we can see the entire game area. Click and drag the pickup game object to move it into the first pickup position. I'm going to place mine at the top of the playing area. With the game object still selected, duplicate it. This can be done either by selecting Edit, Duplicate, or by using the hotkey combination. This is Command D on Mac or Control D on Windows. Now, let's position the second instance of the prefab.
I broke it.
Using the hotkeys, we will create a few more, placing them around the play area.
Oh, if I press the right button, that might help. Okay. There we go. Okay, I'm going to pause this video. Okay. So this is where I'm supposed to draw something inappropriate in the video. That'll be hilarious. Just, I have this feeling I might break something on accident if I do. Also, I know I'm looking at his example almost a little too closely. I don't have any art skills, which is one of the things that deterred me from getting down into the trenches of game creation sooner.
Okay, I've created 12. Let's hit play and test. Excellent. These pickup prefabs are working great. In the next assignment, we'll
Nice.
learn how to pick them
And
up
that's that orange
and
really great.
to count them.
Okay. Moving right
So
along
far,
tonight.
we have created a
Okay. Let's drop the next link in case anyone's following along. I mean, easy enough to find, but oh, I'm curious. Hey, by the way, thanks for all the tips and pointing stuff out. I greatly appreciate that. Let's see, drop the link. Picking up collectibles.
We want to be able to pick up our collectible game objects when our player game object collides with them. To do this, we need to detect our collisions between the player game object and the pickup game objects. We will need to have these collisions trigger a new behavior, and we will need to test these collisions to make sure we're picking up the correct objects. The pickup objects, the player's UFO, and the walls all have colliders that inform us about collisions. If we didn't test our collisions to find out which objects we've collided with, we could collect the wrong objects by accident. We could collect the walls, for example.
Let's collect the walls.
First,
So
we need to
crazy.
reactivate our player. Highlight the player game object and click the active checkbox to make the player visible once more in the scene. Next, let's select the player controller script and open it for editing by double-clicking on the script name in the player controller component. Just a note, we could edit this script regardless of whether the
what did
game
you
object is
double-click?
active or not.
Sounds
Component.
much better.
Let's select the player controller script
Oh, there we
and
go.
open it for editing by double-clicking on the script name in the player controller component.
Oh, I was in the right
Just a
place.
note,
That might help.
we could edit this script regardless of whether the game object is active or not.
Sure, let's normalize the endings. Did that do
Now that we
anything?
have the script
Who knows?
open, what code are we going to write? We could write
I don't
Collider
know.
and then search the documentation using the hotkey combination. But there is a different way that we could do this as well. Let's
You just
return
told me
to
that's the
Unity
way.
and look at the details of our player game object. What we're interested in here is the Circle Collider 2D component. In the header of each component on the left is the component's turn-down arrow, the icon,
Or what?
the Enable checkbox if it's available, and the type of component. On the right is the context-sensitive gear gizmo and an icon of a little book with a question mark. This is what we need. This is the quick link to the component reference in the Unity manual. If we select this icon, we are taken not to the scripting reference, but to the component reference in the Unity manual. We would read this document to find out more about how to use this component in the context of the editor.
Oh, I just
We,
realized.
however, want to find out how to
Here, let's pause this for a second. I just realized I turned the music down forever ago because of commercials. I don't even know where we were at. Let's skip Synergy. I hate that word. I love chance, but not when I'm coding. What do we got here? Oh, it's nice already. Oh, Rogue. That comes up on my Pandora sometimes. Okay. Where did I put Mr. Programmer?
Script to this component's class. To do this, we simply switch to scripting, and we are taken to the scripting reference for the Circle Collider 2D.
That's cool.
We want to detect and test our collisions. For this project, we're going to use onTriggerEnter 2D. You'll find this at the bottom of the documentation page under
Trigger
Messages.
2D.
Just imagine if we were, say, a daring plumber, and we jumped up to collect a perfect arch of coins and bounced off the very first one as we collected it and fell back to the ground. Not very elegant.
I kind of want to make
This
Mario
code
game
will
like
give us
that
the
now.
ability to detect the contact between our player game object and our
Won't
pickup
be worth
game
all the time,
object
but stuff.
without actually creating a physical collision. Click on onTriggerEnter 2D to learn more. The code example on this page is not exactly what we're looking for, but that's okay. We can change it. First, let's copy a portion of this example code. We'll copy from the line
Copy pasta,
public
not
bool
just
character
for the
in
news.
quicksand to the closing bracket of our onTriggerEnter 2D function. Let's paste this beneath our fixed update function.
I'm just gonna type it because I was too lazy to go down there.
Next, let's look at this code. We're using the function onTriggerEnter 2D.
Oh,
onTriggerEnter
Just gonna retype
2D will be
this anyway.
called by Unity when our player game object first touches a 2D trigger collider. We're giving, as an argument, a reference to the 2D trigger collider that we have touched. This is the 2D collider called Other. This reference gives us a way to get a hold of the 2D colliders that we touch. With this code, when we touch another 2D trigger collider, we will set the Boolean variable character in quicksand to true. This won't change anything in our game, but could be used by another script to make the player move slowly, for example. For the sake of this lesson, we'll use this to do something different. Previously, we deactivated the player object manually in the editor when we were creating our pickup objects. Now, we will deactivate our pickup objects via script. First, we can remove the 2 lines containing the character in quicksand variable.
I'm so glad I didn't type it now.
Next, how will we deactivate our pickup objects? Well, what clues do we have? We can address
For
the
this,
other collider's game
like
object through other.gameObject. We want to test the other game object,
My
and
glasses are
if it's a
coming
pickup
fine.
object, we want to deactivate that game object. So let's look up game object with our hotkey combination and see what
There
we
we
can
go.
find. In the documentation page for game object,
Originally
there
got
are a
these
few
because,
important
not
items
for
that
iSync,
we want.
but everything looks a little
The first
squished
is
on
tag.
computer screen.
Tag allows us
I went
to
to college
identify the
online,
game
so everything's
object
like,
by
I cannot read
comparing
these
the tag
textbooks.
value to a string. The second is set active. This is how we
I got
activate
colleges
or
and run-on
deactivate
sentences.
a game object through code. The last item we need to know about is compare tag. Compare tag allows us to efficiently compare the tag of any game object to a string value. Let's open up these 3 items, each in their own tab.
I'm loving this guy. Let's open up 20 tabs. That's exactly how I work.
Tag allows us to identify a game object by a tag value. We must declare our tags in the Tags and Layers panel before using them. Once the tag has
Okay, so
been
like an idea
declared, we
class.
can use this
Cool.
tag in our code. In this example, the game object's tag is being set to player.
All my
To
JavaScript
test,
references
check,
are because all I
or
do is
compare a
with PHP
tag,
connected
there is an
databases.
efficient
grab the data and
built-in
run logic.
way, and that
I
is
rarely
compare tag.
have to use classes in
With
my
compare
environment,
tag, we can efficiently compare the tag of any game object with a string value.
like PHP classes. I mean, I use
Let's copy the
JavaScript
sample
classes.
code and paste it
A
into our
lot.
working palette.
Again, he's got this like
Now,
finished code on here,
GameObject.setActive.
throwing all these red lines.
This is how we activate or deactivate the game object. This is the code equivalent of clicking the active checkbox next to the name field in the inspector. In our case, just like the code snippet, we will call GameObject.setActiveFalse to deactivate our pickup game objects. Let's copy this code and returning to our script editor, paste it into our palette as well. I feel we have enough pieces to write our code. Let's delete the game object that we previously typed, and let's modify the following line to read if other.gameObject.compareTag pickup. The pickup tag has already been defined in the project that you downloaded, but we'll take a look at how to add your own tag to the Tags and Layers panel.
It's not adding brackets here, man.
We can also delete the
stop
destroy other.gameObject line. We are going to add braces to our if statement. This code will work without braces. Without braces, however, only the next line of code is associated with the if statement. All remaining lines of code will be executed regardless of how the conditions in the if statement are met. To associate multiple lines of code with an if statement, they must be enclosed in braces. For clarity, in this case, we will enclose our GameObject.setActiveFalse line inside a set of braces, making sure that the code is properly indented. Remember, indenting code has no meaning to the compiler.
Of course, isn't there like Perl or Python?
Creating braces around our code now not only makes the association with the if statement clear, but will allow us to easily update this block of code in later lessons.
He's going over programming basic. Let's see.
With the script as it's currently written, we would be setting the player's game object to inactive. Instead, we want to deactivate.
I can't wait till I get free screen so I can see everything. Oh yeah, I don't want to edit binary files. I've never gotten much into like computer file settings. I'll just Google it anytime I need something, and then looks like my video is frozen on Twitch, so I don't even know if you're hearing me. Just gonna type everything. Like, rip out this chat box and just put it somewhere. Button that would do that. Nope, that's something else. Edit appearance. Oh, boom. There we go. I'm sorry I did not figure this out sooner. Yeah, now we're rocking. Now if I could just like stick that to the wall. And let's do this that large. There we go. Wait, welcome to the chat room. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I can see my text in this little pop-up window I have, but Sal, I'm not seeing you. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna... Yeah, there we go. Boom. Why is he making me deactivate my player? Oh, I think he's having me deactivate the the spinny things, the pickups. But yeah, he is in the player class, so maybe it goes into it. So it's like anchoring onto the player when it touches other things, it's going to deactivate them. I mean, I guess you could always just go into the pickup and say, hey, when anything touches me, deactivate, since we only have one player, but I guess any more involved game that might not pan out.
The other game object. So let's change our second line to other.gameObject.setActive false. Now, this
Man,
code
I
will
got
be
this working
called
now.
every time we touch a 2D trigger collider. We're given a reference to the collider we touch. In other, we test its tag,
Those other,
and if the tag is the same as the string value pickup, we will
call
take
that
the
other.
other game object and we will call setActive false, which will
Interesting.
deactivate that
Huh,
game
I'll try that next.
Let's save the script and return to Unity.
Wait, so what is this? So what does destroy do? Is it like the game object's still there, but it's just the same line of code as this? This reminds me of math class in high school where they would tell you the hard way to do everything, and then you finally figure out, oh wait, I could do this in like 10 less lines.
to check for errors.
So I'm loving all these tips. So basically what I'm doing is going through and just like relearning the basics so I can start applying it to my own game, which I'm going to probably do, or at least start on when I finish this tutorial. We have an actual programmer that's going to be doing a lot of the main code, so I don't know how much code I'm going to be doing. I'm at least going to get a head start. He's been swamped with work, and so I was like, okay, I will learn something and I will be useful. So it's just completely gone from the scene. But like, is the oh, let me bring Unity back up. So is it like still over here, or is it just totally destroyed? Because honestly, if I had 1,000 of these, I would just want to destroy them. Be like, no, I don't want to be active. Just get rid of it. The game will get faster as you play it. Okay, let's
The
see.
first thing we need to do is to set the tag value for our pickup prefab.
Yeah. Also, this is like 3 or 4 year old video, so this might be
Navigate to the prefabs folder and highlight the pickup prefab in the project window.
So set active would
With
be
the
good if I was like turning it back on. Like if I had these things respawn after a minute, like if I was flying through, respawn after 2 minutes, and then go back and get it. Here, let me write a note in my code. I don't know if the conversations get saved on Twitch. I'm digging this. Thanks, man. I'm just gonna copy. So it tries to auto write everything else I do, but it doesn't type the end of the comment. Okay, cool. I will remember that. That's some good stuff.
Pickup highlighted, click on the tag list at the top of the inspector. We'll see that the pickup tag has been predefined as part of the project. If we needed to define an additional tag, we could choose Add Tag. This opens the Tags and Layers panel. Here, we can hit the plus button to we'll check for
Go
errors.
back a bit. Okay.
The first thing we need to do is to set the tag value for our pickup prefab. Navigate to the prefabs folder
I
and
still don't know why it's
highlight
the
the
prefab.
pickup prefab
I
in
wonder
the
if that was
project
a
window.
requirement years ago
With
or
the
something.
pickup highlighted, click on the tag list at the top of the inspector. We'll see that the pickup tag has been
Yeah, word. I mean, I don't know. I use kind of the same thing in JavaScript all the time, or well, technically jQuery, where I'll hide and show stuff just to make interactive web pages. Like, oh, this field's gone, now it's back, now I'm doing this. But it's so interesting looking at game logic, where it's like, okay, I can't envision all the various scenarios I might run into when I play games, like looking at it from behind the scenes. I haven't imagined, okay, well, I'll need destroy over here, I'll need set active, turned off over here, I'll need this. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that comes to mind right now for set active is respawning, which I got. I'm going to be respawning these things.
Predefined as part of the project.
Wait, hold on 1 second. Where did I put this screen? That screen, we'll keep here. Love the age of technology. I'm actually messaging my friends who are hanging out and looking at them like, how much longer are you guys hanging out?
If we needed to define an additional tag, we could choose Add Tag. This opens the Tags and Layers panel. Here, we can hit
Let's set up something. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I guess I didn't even think about that. So you're saying that I can just create new objects on the fly, like just instantiate and like create new object of this class. Maybe even give it a randomized location with some boundaries. Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel like we gotta look this up now because now I'm curious, because there's got to be a reason. I mean, I don't know if he's going to cover it in this tutorial. There we go. The performance difference. I don't think I'm going to be making anything performance intensive. Oh, it's if it's screen destroying a whole bunch in a short time. Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't have to create the object when it's just hiding and showing. Okay, I guess that makes sense. So I guess it's just situational. But again, I'm not going to be doing anything intensive. So it's going to be like 6 one way, half dozen another at this point until we start getting into later stages.
hit the plus button to add a new tag
that's the
to our
last time.
list of tags. To delete a tag,
I got pause the video, I'm all over the place here. Not so much digging this. See what time this is all about.
highlight
that was
it,
anybody's favorite
and
song.
hit minus. Next, highlight the pickup prefab
Add a tag.
and
delete a
let's
tag.
assign the pickup tag to it using the tag menu. Select pickup. Now, through the power of prefabs, if we highlight a pickup in the hierarchy, we'll see that it
I was gonna say, Sal, your comments remind me, like, every programming book ever usually has a bunch of extra stuff, or stuff that nobody actually uses. When I originally was taking C# and especially Java, back in college, way back when, I had 2 class books for Java, and then I went out and got 3 more, because they were all so convoluted and they had typos, but you don't know they're typos because you don't know. And I would read the same chapter in each book, 5 completely different books written by different people, and you read all 5 chapters about the same topic, and you're like, I get it now.
It too
That all
has
makes
been
sense.
tagged pickup. Now, let's test our game. Save the scene and enter play mode.
Okay, maybe that's what we prefab.
Okay, our tag is set to pickup, but we're
Maybe.
still colliding with the pickup objects, just like we are with the walls. So let's exit play mode. Before
stuck.
we discuss why
No.
we are bouncing
Can't
off the
escape.
pickup objects rather than picking them up, we need to have a brief discussion about Unity's physics system. Let's look at one of our pickups and our player. As an aside, we can select 2 or more game objects at the same time and inspect them all. We
Oh
do
yeah,
this
I'm
by
totally
holding
playing on
down
that once I get
Command
just
key
through the
on
end of this.
Mac
Kind of like
or
get
the
a feel
Control
for it.
key on Windows and selecting the game objects. When we select multiple
I
objects,
missed
note
something.
how the inspector changes to show the comp or the control.
Yeah, sorry for the pausing. Multitasking while reading and listening to this guy. He's not panning out for me. But, yeah, my whole plan is just finish these 9 short videos. I'm going to finish this one and probably be done for the evening. Ha, I got the whiskey going. And then when I finish these 9, I'm not sure if I want to like try to jump in where our lead programmer's already got a game going. But I think what I'm going to try to do is to start building like a basic RPG from scratch and just kind of mess around with it. And from there I might just Google. I figured the first time I went through Unity I just Googled everything and I somehow, like, maybe I just got too busy with life, but I got so distracted and followed through with it. So that's the whole reason I'm trying a different route this time. It's just like, mix it up a
Key
bit.
on Windows and selecting discussion about we're still colliding.
At least all the stuff this guy's
Let's
giving me
look at one
actually
of our
works.
pickups and our player.
I mean,
As
I
an
remember
aside,
following
we
so
can
many
select 2 or
tutorials
more game objects at the same time and inspect them all. We do this by
Or
holding
you
down
follow
the
this
Command
tutorial.
key on Mac or the Control key on Windows and selecting the game objects.
Wait,
When we
what?
select multiple
No.
objects, note how the inspector changes to show the common components and property values of the
Oh,
selected
sorry,
game
he's doing
objects.
control selected, so it's just
The
select and
inspector
click and
also
left.
allows for multi-object editing. Using multi-object
Oh yeah, no doubt. We were originally like, so my first game idea I was gonna start on like 6 years ago was gonna be this massive RPG, and I had written bits and pieces of the story, and we were gonna fill in the blanks as we went. And 2 years into getting nothing done, I mean, all of us had no time. I was like, oh, let's just make a tower defense, and tower defense got complicated. And so now we're actually working on a zombie game where you just walk around, you pick up pieces, you shoot zombies, and then we're eventually going to implement the pieces into like a building system, maybe put some turrets in there, and we're just going to like slowly improve upon it. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. Maybe starting smaller would be a better idea. I don't know. I mean, as soon as I finish this tutorial, maybe get a new computer this weekend. I'm planning on it for a while, which is why I've been ramping up on this. I'm kind of just gonna just throw stuff together and see what we get. Find a bunch of free images and be like, oh, this image looks like a knight. We'll do a game with knights. Oh, this one looks like a werewolf. Okay, the knight's fighting a werewolf. And just kind of mess around with it. So there's no solid plan here. At least not for me at this time. I'm just a game designer. And so I'm just trying to jump in and build something that's like, what are we going to put here?
editing, I'm going to disable the sprite renderer on both the player's UFO and the selected pickup with a single click. This leaves us with the 2 green outlines of the 2D collider area. Select 2 or more game objects at the same time and inspect them all. Pick up objects.
Okay, what is he
Just
trying
like
to
we
do
are
here?
with the walls. So let's exit play mode. Before we discuss why we are bouncing off the pickup objects rather than picking them up, we need to have a brief discussion about Unity's physics system. Let's look at one of our pickups and our player.
I
As
dig
an
that.
aside, we can select 2 or more
Attack of the
game objects at
Unicorn.
the same time and inspect them all. We do this by
Selecting
holding down the
like
Command key on Mac or the Control
Oh,
key on Windows
I see
and
what he's
selecting the
doing.
game
He's selecting
objects.
the player and
When
one
we
of the
select
pickups.
multiple objects, note how
Okay,
the
I thought he was
inspector
selecting, like,
changes to show
two
the
pickups
common
at a time.
components and property values of the selected game objects. The inspector also allows for multi-object editing. Using multi-object editing, I'm going to disable the sprite renderer on both the player's UFO and the selected pickup with a
Okay,
single
I
click.
see what he's doing.
This leaves us with the two green outlines of the 2D collider areas for these two objects. So, how do collisions work in Unity's 2D physics engine? The 2D physics engine does not allow two 2D collider areas to overlap.
If I kill that and get
Remember
rich,
how
you're gonna
the
have to
player
like
was
send me your
ejected
email
from
address.
the middle of the background sprite in
But
our
I can
previous
send you
lesson.
cash.
When the 2D
Don't do it
physics
just yet.
engine
We'll be broke
detects
for a while.
any two or more 2D colliders will overlap that frame, the 2D physics engine will look at the objects and analyze their speed, rotation, and shape, and calculate a collision.
So do you work on any
One
games
of the
yourself?
major factors in this calculation is whether the 2D colliders are static or dynamic. Static
Well, I mean, of course you do,
colliders
because
are
you-
usually
after you
non-moving
experience
parts of our
dimensions, but,
scene, like
are you
the
working on anything
walls,
right now?
the floor, or other parts of the scenery. Dynamic colliders are things that move, like the player's UFO or a car. When calculating a collision, the static geometry will not be affected by the collision, but the dynamic objects will be. In our case, the player's UFO is dynamic or moving geometry, and it is bouncing off the static geometry of the pickups just as it bounces off the static geometry of the walls. However, the 2D physics engine can allow the penetration or overlap of 2D collider areas. When it does this, the 2D physics engine still calculates the 2D collider areas and keeps track of the collider overlap, but it doesn't physically act on the overlapping objects. It doesn't cause a collision. We do this by making our 2D colliders into triggers, or 2D trigger colliders. When we make our colliders into a trigger, we can detect the contact with that 2D trigger through the 2D on-trigger event messages. When a 2D collider is a trigger, we can do clever things like place a trigger in the middle of a doorway in, for example, an adventure game, and when the player enters the trigger, the minimap updates and a message plays, "You have discovered this room." Or, every time our player walks into
Oh, that's what I could do. I could make a choose your own adventure game. If you've ever seen those books where you're going through a mansion, and each time you pick a door, it's like, okay, we'll flip to this page, and you pick a door there, and you flip to another page, and it's a giant maze. I could do that in game form. So I'd be changing game states or scenes or something. Oh, that's cool. I have a board game that I go to every Friday. We play a game kind of like that called Small World or Small Worlds. I've only played it a couple of times. And then the Behemoth, or the Behemoth, whatever the game studio is called, is coming out with a game that it's hexagonal, but I don't think it's buying lands or anything. Yeah, Small World. I think we played it with 6 players. And it's really fun. You gotta get land to expand your armies. That looks hexagonal. Hold on, I didn't think of something else. This is a game I was thinking of, but it's not hexagonal. That sounds cool, man. When you get it going, I look forward to playing it.
area, a sound plays, because the player has walked through a trigger. For more information on 2D on collision and 2D on trigger messages, see the lessons linked below. We are using on trigger enter 2D in our code rather than on collision enter 2D. So we need to change our collider 2D areas into trigger areas. Let's select the prefab asset and look at the Circle Collider 2D component. I'm going to reactivate the 2 sprite renderers and highlight the pickup prefab. In the Circle Collider 2D component, we see a property called isTrigger. Let's set this to true. Now, let's enter play mode and test.
Yeah, same here. I mean, again, doing this for
Excellent.
6 years.
Let's exit play mode.
We have not
So
done
far,
anything.
everything looks great, but we have one issue.
Oh,
We've made a
that's
small
good
mistake, which is related to how
Multitasking.
Unity optimizes its 2D physics. When using 2D physics, all of the static or non-moving colliders are calculated as a single body. This increases performance. If we move a collider that the engine is not expecting to move, the static collider for all our non-moving objects will have to be recalculated. If we do this every frame, we risk our game losing performance. Where we've made our mistake is by rotating our pickups. We need to indicate to Unity which 2D colliders are dynamic before we move them. We do this by using the rigid body 2D component. Any game object with a 2D collider and a rigid body 2D is considered dynamic. Any game object with a 2D collider but no rigid body 2D is expected to be static. Currently, our pickup game objects have a circle collider but no rigid body 2D. So Unity is recreating the colliders for the...
Okay. I'm going to have to pause on tonight's session. He is not resonating with me anymore. And I'm not retaining. I'm probably going to rewatch this in my spare time and then come back. Okay. Checking it out on the other screen. Oh, that looks wicked. Enhance the page. Nice, and so you've got like nice different biomes and stuff. A whole lot of potential to like make them do different things. I love it. That looks really cool, man. Nice. Well, hey, thanks for sharing with me. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with me. Much appreciated. Let me find my actual Twitch page. It is hiding over here somewhere. Okay, so I close this. Okay, that worked as expected. Good. Okay. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to be setting up another time to stream on Wednesday if nothing comes up, and trying to get regular streams going on Wednesday nights and Monday nights. So I hope I catch you on the next time, and here, let me do this. See if I can find you and catch you whenever you're streaming as well. Oh wait, I probably just click on your name. Nope.
Oh yeah, we got a big star here.
Cool. Gave you a follow, and have a good night. Yeah, totally. I wasn't sure if I should actually even talk during this map, and I watched some Twitch videos like, oh yeah, you should show your face, you should talk. I'm like, I'll talk a little bit. Okay, have a good night.